because I know I am, and listen to Jordan's book, and I knew that he lost his wife, but just listening to what he went through more in detail was, everybody needs to hear that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I heard a quote that you should, it's not a quote, it's more of a statement, to think of death frequently, often. And I think that is so important, because it helps you really have that perspective of going back to just being grateful. Because listening to Jordan's book, I hug her, I look at her differently, and life is so damn temporary. You really should treat it like that.
You want to be extremely grateful, but you don't want, and I've talked to him about this, you don't want to be so overly obsessed with trying to be grateful where you're worried every day that something bad's going to happen.
That is the flip side of it.
Right.
Anxiety, man.
Oh yeah, I know all about that. And so do these folks. These folks have a lot of anxiety. And, with that being said, having had that issue, it's so nice to be able to then help somebody, right? Because, you don't go to the dentist for a heart problem. The dentist doesn't know how to help you, right? So, but if you can, I relate it to, any addiction. Like if you're an alcoholic, like talking to someone else who's an alcoholic, right?
Yeah.
Not to somebody who's like a therapist. I hate to say
this,
who's
all
like,
the time.
right?
Yes.
I had anxiety so bad. I was having panic attacks, and I was, like I said, I was suicidal. I was off the wall. And nobody knew. I was running a business, owned a couple houses, had the cars, had the wife, had the kids. And if you looked at me from the outside, you're like, what is that guy anxious about, right? But the thing about it was like, I went to a therapist and they handed me a couple pieces of paper and they're like, you should work on your deep breathing. And I was like, dude, I take a deep breath and I think I'm going to die.
Yeah.
Right? What do you mean? And so for me, I needed to find somebody who could sort of understand it, and it could resonate with them, and they'd be like, I've been there, and I get it.
Yep.
Have you ever, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. Have you ever used breathing exercises before?
Yeah, I meditate every day.
So I don't know if you know this, but our first big guest was Nenea Reeves. Nenea Reeves, she just posted a picture of her with the CEO of NVIDIA today. Oh. She's one of the biggest tech women globally. She was the COO of EA Sports Online at one point, and now she's the CEO of Trip VR. Okay. Trip VR is a guided breathwork meditation platform.
Yes.
And I started using that at a very difficult point in my life, and not necessarily to promote just the application but breathing exercise and meditation. I never in a million years thought I'd be sitting here talking about it. Yeah. It has changed the course of my life, along with faith. I said when we first started this podcast journey, I'm like, we're not going to talk about politics or religion. And I always have been a religious person, just not like I should have been, but it's changed my life as well. Just having that faith, being able to cast my anxieties and fears, very real fears, and just be like, you know what, whatever happens is God's plan. I just got to roll with it.
And it's worked for us. It's
it
every
really
day
has.
gets,
And faith can be, you know what I mean? Whatever it is. It can be just a higher spiritual connection or
something positive.
Yeah, you don't have to drive into that whole religious thing, right? You just have a belief in something.
Say, hey, this is what worked for me. I don't care what you do necessarily. Hopefully it works for you too.
Belief in something.